So the humans were spreading through the stars. Faster than light engines were actually not that big of a deal. Well, the first time crossing that barrier was spectacularly hard, but now we knew how to do it. There were many, many stars that we visited. Turns out, habitable planets and even planets with an ecosystem of life are not really rare. We found a lot of them just in our little sidearm of the galaxy. And our exploration ships are still out and about. There was quite the backlog for the scientists that follow in their wake, and an even longer one for the shipyards that just could not churn out colony ships fast enough. It was a remarkable period of history happening for that generation of humans. Pushing into outer space, the most eager always were the tiny and fast ships of the SETI program. For all of those incredible forms of animal life we had encountered so far, the species we had found living on those life-rich worlds were unimaginably stupid. Nearly classified as plants kind of stupid. A housefly would flatten the most complex of them in a game of chess kind of stupid. There was nothing that could communicate, or even form the inkling of a communicable thought. Not even some simple comprehensible intelligence that could at least react to us in some meaningful way. 2 days ago that changed. Big time. We received electromagnetic signals traveling the void between some two systems. We found their source and sent every kind of greeting we could think of on the way there. And we not only received an answer, but began communicating. Simple beeps and boops, of course, at first. The smartest humans were pining over those signals and messages, trying to translate and interpret them, and simultaneously figure out a way to make our noises understandable. They failed. Though there is always another party in a conversation, and luckily for us, they did not fail. So the humans got an invitation. One human, a non-aggressive ship. And a specific location outside our known space where they would await us. Since it sounded extremely risky and very much like a trap, it actually took a couple of seconds before the SETI program was utterly overwhelmed with applications by volunteers. One human was pronounced ambassador as quickly as possible to stem the madness. Thrown into an exploration ship that was mostly automated and then slung into the general direction of our hopefully soon-to-be friends. Following these directives brought the exploration ship to an empty part of space, the nearest star light years away. At first, nothing else seemed to be there, and only after the ambassador reran the sensor sweep, another ship was picked up. Its signature was tiny, making it nearly invisible. She sent the prepared greeting and promptly received back an answer, an approach vector, and an invitation to come aboard. The ambassador sat on what could pass as a stool before a window that parted the room. On the other side, that had a much deeper floor, stood a member of the sapient alien species. It was at least 6 times her height and towered over her. As far as she could discern, it sat on a single appendage not unlike a snake's tail, but stubby and thick as a tree trunk. The upper body slimmed slightly to what probably was the torso and then steeply curved into broad shoulders where it had 2 arms that could probably reach the floor if they weren't in a mantis pose. There were another 2 pairs of shorter and thinner appendages hanging from the torso below the shoulders that had very fine 3-digit manipulators on their ends, that was relatively speaking. These hands would have easily be big enough to pick up a human. At the very top was the head hanging on a bent neck, which could have been called snake-like as well, though it was all wrong. 2 broad and flat, no visible mouth, and 2 pairs of fully black eyes on the sides. There was no way to tell if it was wearing clothes, the flat gray color entirely featureless. Practically the same as the walls around her. Taking in these details, she had already forgotten about the device she had picked up from the chair and curiously inspected before the wall had suddenly become transparent. It was a palm-sized disc with an entirely smooth and unbroken beige surface. The material felt warm to the touch, though the significant weight made her believe it was made from metal. "Greetings," an emotionless voice chirped from the unknown device that turned out to be obviously be a translator. The voice did not fit the massive size of those aliens. It sounded more like a badly recorded child speaking with distorted blabber running in the background. At the same time, the alien behind the glass slowly turned its head to point its eyes at her in a gaze that felt like a stadium spotlight. She immediately forgot the standard welcome message she was supposed to deliver and replied while seemingly shrinking, "Hello? Your ship is mathematically incorrect," the device chirped. "My what?" "Your ship is mathematically incorrect." This was a strange start of relations, and that translator device might be useless altogether. But at least she managed to compose herself to begin anew and by protocol. "I am Ambassador Neil and I am being sent to represent all humankind. I come with a message of peace and the will to establish a bond of friendship between our species and our worlds so that we may learn from each other and grow together in sharing our knowledge." In the dash. "Why is it incorrect? Your ship?" She eyed the translator. After a brief moment she spoke, "I do not understand your question about my ship. Why did you build it? Like this design? Your ship, no movement from the alien being." Even if she could read its body language, there was no way to tell if it was curious, annoyed, or critical. The emotionless artificial voice did not help either and was harder to understand through more of that background noise. What kind of question was that? Ambassador Neil did not build the ship and she knew next to nothing about spaceship engineering. Though that alien vessel was very exotic in design from what she had seen on her approach. Curves and fluid, round shapes dominated its form that had the silhouette of an elongated disc with bulbous extrusions on the flat areas. There was no way of telling which was front or back, no breaks in the surface for engine outlets, windows, lights, or sensors. It looked more like an art piece than a spaceship, and the insides had not been any different. The corridor that had led her from the docking area to this room was unbroken as well. Walking through it, she had taken in the soft off-white color of the floor that transitioned fluently up the curved walls into a dark gray on the ceiling that had a soft wavy structure. Though it was pleasantly bright, there was no visible lighting source. Or anything else besides the bare surfaces. The smaller human exploration vessel looked embarrassingly clunky in comparison. Was that what did the alien being want to express? The ship was built along well-established design principles. It is a functional vessel made for long-distance exploration. "May I ask a name with which I can address you?" It lifted one of its four smaller arms to point at her, again in a very slow motion. The translator sprung into action after it was finished. "This object." "Two objects. They are exactly the same." It took her a moment to gather what it was probably talking about. On her white all-purpose pressure suit were shoulder ribbons, old-style ones made from a textile weave, adorned with brightly dyed yarn to form several differently colored stripes. And they were symmetrical. Maybe this was something light to talk about, so she took them off and laid them onto her forearms side by side. "These are insignias that indicate my function as an ambassador. All humans in official functions carry clear identifying markers with them, though these are also ceremonial and their design dates back far into our history." It still was pointing, and the strong gaze was unbroken. "How did you build it? The insignias? Exactly the same?" It took her a moment to form a reply. "I don't know how they are made. I think there is dash." "How? Do you?" "Not know," the translator spoke louder than before. Maybe it only seemed louder because the being had leaned markedly closer to the glass. Ambassador Neil shifted on the stool. This was not at all how it was supposed to go. She had no idea what the alien was going on about. Maybe it was not a representative of their species? Maybe this was an interrogation? Or maybe they just made a big mistake trying to do a face-to-face meeting this early after the first communication.